Can we get started, please? Thank you very much. Okay, my name is Didar Singh. I'm Secretary General of FICCI, and may I confirm to all of you our, well, second day of welcome, and actually a congratulations to all of you for the excellent day we've had yesterday. And thank you for joining us again this early morning, despite Delhi traffic and Delhi pollution putting both together. But you're here in the morning, and thank you for being with us. And we have a very special speaker and a very special keynote for you this morning, which will really sparkle the debates that we are all part of at this 11th Education Conference. This is Mr. Anthony Salcito. I'm sorry, I'm not so good on the... Salcito, okay, wonderful. He's Vice President Worldwide Education of Microsoft, where we all know is doing a tremendous job, not only in its work in the business field, but also to help empower educators and inspire students. Prior to this, he was General Manager of Education in the United States, supporting schools and universities across the country, and he helped launch the company's cornerstone education programs. He joined Microsoft in 1992, spending early years at the company architecting high-profile products launched in the Windows NT and Windows 95. He's been involved with a large number of other projects also, as well as he with the boards of National Foundation of Teaching Entrepreneurship, Junior Achievement of Washington, European Foundation, etc., etc. We are really happy to have somebody of this level and this experience with us, and I welcome Anthony to kindly come and take the stage. Thank you very much, sir.
Oh, yeah. Well, good morning, everyone. I'm super excited to be here with everyone, and I'm going to speak for a little bit, but I want this to be interaction and discussion. I know that there was a great deal of discussion yesterday, and I got a good background on all the conversations that were happening, and it was great to hear because it's aligned to what we're seeing globally. One of the great things about my role, and I really have an amazing job I'm lucky to have because I get a chance to see amazing people who care about the children and the future of their countries and are working hard to make it happen. I also get a chance to see trends globally. And I travel probably 30, 40 countries at least a year, but talking to countries from many, many other parts of the world in various national or other large global activities that I participate in. And I get a chance to see the dynamics that are happening inside of schools, inside of universities around the world. In many cases, the conversations are very similar. I talk a little bit about be more, expect more, do more, be more as a foundation for what we need to change. And I think this reflects a lot of the conversation that we had yesterday around expecting more about higher education in India. And what are we trying to build and transform to? The universal truth in the world of higher education, the world of education more broadly, is that there isn't a country that doesn't believe change is necessary, isn't working to improve, and doesn't feel urgency for improving the impact in the classroom and with students and education. Even the best performing countries, and you talked yesterday with Korea, who has one of the best education systems from a performance perspective, even Korea feels a need to improve and grow their education foundation. In the country that I come from, the US, which has a very rich heritage in higher education, the reality is there's a real desire to transform and rebuild the system because of those dynamics. And one of the things about my work, I get a chance to talk to school leaders and educators around the world, and these trends come up. We see security, budget strains, the dynamics around open courseware and MOOCs, creating sort of disruption and opportunity for institutions. The influx of data and how data is going to be used. These are issues that I assume are happening across Indian universities, but are happening across the globe. And I actually have a blog called Daily Adventures, and this is a blog that I spend time talking to school leaders every day, and I get feedback about what's happening. And these are the sort of the core trends, and these are 6 things that I think are reflective of the sort of the top line feedback that I hear when I talk to educators, faculty, school leaders, university presidents around sort of the issues that are top of mind. And certainly, these are representative of some of the things that come up. There's obviously a need for funding and sort of support to grow this change, recognizing that IT is a strategic asset to an institution's growth. How do we think about this dynamic around teaching and learning and how to transform the learning environment for a university in and out of the classroom? And what does that look like? What is the purpose of the instruction inside of the classroom in a world where online learning and learning outside of a classroom is actually a potential? And these are issues that are swirling around the state of higher education, and certainly I'll talk a little bit about many of them. And when you have questions, we can go deeper on some of these issues. But the reality and the most fundamental foundation that we have to connect is this need for change that we see broadly and the reality of this economic shift that we see in our society. This is in many ways the reason why we're caring about this dynamic. And it's very, very important, in my opinion, to start with what we're trying to do. Why do we care about transforming higher education? What's the reason? Are we trying to fuel our economic potential as a country? Are we trying to help create an educated population? Is it one and the same? But I think that foundation is critically important. And we know the world of work is vastly and fundamentally changed. The types of jobs that are growing in India and globally require a different set of skills than what we actually are producing in many parts of the education system. The dynamics for how people communicate, collaborate, express ideas is changed inside of the world of work. And in many ways, the new pedagogies that we need in our education systems are an outgrowth of that dynamic. It's no longer okay to have a content and assessment balanced education system where the focus is actually learning content and the measurement is just the core assessment. The world of work actually requires people who can think creatively and constructively, can work collaboratively across teams. And in many ways, when we see our pedagogy systems in education changing, introducing flip-based classroom models, introducing dynamics around project-based learning or service-based learning, this reflects the dynamic of why, of what we need to build for from the world of work. So beyond all of the conversation around technology, the purpose-driven agenda for higher education is the most critical one to align to. And when I look at that, is understanding this workforce shift is really the core for me as it relates to the shift that's going on across these environments. And I would say if you look at the top bar in terms of what's enabling in the bottom bar, a lot of the dynamics of what we're trying to build in our classrooms are an outgrowth of this transition. Now this is a necessary reality in pursuit because the reality is the world's fastest growing economies have a huge workforce misalignment, where in many cases the educated population in India is the best it's ever been in the history in terms of percentage of students going to school, completing advanced degrees, etc. But there's still a workforce unemployability gap. And employers have jobs that they can't fill in India and everywhere around the world. In many cases, these jobs represent the fastest growing segments of the economy and the job growth. And it's because the world that we've been producing for schools and universities is actually not aligned holistically or perfectly to the world of work that's growing. So when you start with this purpose-driven agenda and you actually look at why we're here, why do we care about transformation? In many ways, we care about it to make our schools run more effectively and efficiently because costs are constrained. And another reason we care about the new services we can deliver with technology. But the reason all of those things are happening and the goal is because we need higher education as the engine for economic growth and prosperity of our people. And when you have that context, it makes all of the other things come in focus for sure. Now, we've known, as it relates to technology, that we've had a digital divide. In many parts of the world, this has been a huge challenge. And this divide has been access to devices, access to technology, access to broadband, etc. And in many ways, we're making strides and continue to make strides globally in this area. It's still a concern. It's still an area that Microsoft spends time focusing on, but frankly, it's a concern that we still have to wrestle with. But I will actually say that we have a different concern. The concern that I see is not the digital divide of old, which is largely access. The digital divide that we have now is impact. That we have technology across schools and universities in India that isn't meeting its potential, that isn't providing the output that we need to drive the impact in our classrooms, with our students, with our faculty. And this is true universally around the world, where we have the potential for changing everything about how we use data, how we create innovation and motivation for students with technology. In many ways, what we've done is automate the old learning models in the best cases. In many other cases, we haven't actually even done that, where technology has created more strain and cost and challenge into the system. What we have to do is actually work hard to do this. And I see examples of this all around the world. There's a picture from a university that I took that invested in smart boards. I actually had a meeting with the IT administration talking about how they were modernizing the classrooms. And then I was on a tour of the schools, et cetera, and I took a picture of this example, which is partly sort of an indication of this dynamic, where the old world of sort of this environment and technology is still struggling to meet its impact in universities. In this case, a smart board that was invested at probably a few $1,000s is being used pretty much to support the old world of physical tools and devices. And this is partly because we have to do a better job of integrating the tools. It's partly because we have to expect more than just automation. What are we transforming about the learning environment? And in many ways, it requires us to start inside out. What are we trying to do? What's the environment that we're trying to create in our classrooms? What's the dialogue we want to have with our curriculum, our content, with students? And then apply technology thoughtfully and purposefully for that journey, versus the other way around, which it's often been applied, where technology comes, we acquire it, and then we work on how do we use it, how do we make it effective, et cetera. That slows progress down, and for many faculty, they'll never get beyond automation. When you drop a device into the hands of a faculty member, the first thing that she or he will ask is, how do I use it? The second thing they'll ask is, how do they take what they were doing before and transition it to the new device? Then they'll ask, how do I plug it into the projector? How do I pay for it when it breaks, whatever. But the questions that will be continued to be asked on the journey are largely focused around the thing that you actually provided in the first place. When you actually strip the technology away and ask about the learning journey, what are we trying to achieve? What dynamic do we want in our classrooms with our students? How do we use the capabilities of resources that exist in the world? The dialogue shifts quite a bit, and technology becomes a tool to serve a journey that's more thoughtful, more ambitious, and actually will have a higher yield for the impact in the institution. And that shift is very important that we need to make. Now, we know that technology is certainly a part of this journey. It's certainly not the most important. Frankly, it may be surprising for many of you, but when I speak around the world and when I talk to schools and universities, I primarily tell them to shift their thinking away from technology and to shift it on the people and the impact that they're trying to achieve. How do we prepare leaders to embrace this change, to think differently, to allow faculty and students to explore and challenge the status quo? How do we create a scaled innovation? These are the challenges that we face. Technology is actually growing and making great strides, getting better, cheaper, more powerful. And that will continue to be the case. And that digital divide I talked about is growing because we haven't prepared our people to make the change more holistic and more bold as it relates to this journey. So I'm very comfortable with the technology elements here. And there's amazing technologies around how we shift and modernize our digital courseware, how we're using data to actually drive personalized learning, and analytics like machine learning to actually drive intelligence predictively to the faculty and student. And there's a world that we can actually expand digitally with the cloud technologies to enable students to learn from everywhere and move beyond what we've thought of traditionally as one-to-one learning, and really shift, not focusing on one student to one device, but shifting one student to a world of knowledge. So it's almost one to everyone. as it relates to this shift from one-to-one. And that's the journey that we've got to get to as it relates to this environment. I'm just going to focus on really 3 key areas, and I'll open up for questions. Now, increase efficiency and performance, improve learning outcomes and student success, and advance research and innovation. I believe all of these 3 things came up yesterday in discussion. These are sort of the big rocks that I see when we work with higher education specifically. Now, one of the things that's true about this is that data is driving all of these. Now, it's driving everything from efficiency, certainly to research, but it really is the beginning of a journey for institutions. In many ways, when I would actually say, if I would ask any folks in the universities here, measure your transition is how well are you using data? What are you collecting? What is that data telling you to drive action? Not how well you can display it. Because I see lots of universities that can give me great charts and graphs of the data, but actually it's not driving any decisions. Most people don't look at those charts or graphs to drive anything. In many cases, there's no history or breadcrumb trail in terms of what the data is doing and what was set up to actually change. You've got to actually think holistically about how data drives activity across environments. That will not only increase performance, everything from how you use IoT to manage energy of a campus building, and there's savings to be made there for sure. Certainly in places like India, how do we move from paper-filled environments to paperless environments will grow efficiency. That will also create an opportunity for data to be used more effectively. And there are many, many common realities that I see with regards to universities and data. The data is often siloed from department to department, school to school, maybe faculty member to faculty member. There's no legacy of the data. There's not alignment of what we're trying to collect. In many ways, we collect the data that's most easy to collect, but that data is often not the most helpful. And in many cases, we have to think about what we're trying to change and then find how we can get the data to actually drive outcomes. Very, very core elements, but a critically element to start this transformation is how you're using data across an institution. The secondly, a piece, and this is certainly true, is that we see the world of higher education being much more constrained by outcome focus. That certainly for chancellors, for IT officials, etc., changing for change's sake is no longer good enough. You need results. You need to say, what are we doing? What's the impact it's having on student performance, student outcomes? What's it happening on cost savings, etc.? And that actually, I think, is a healthy environment for providing this change. Because this is actually the way in which you'll actually constrain your focus to make that change focus really happen. Now, this is, again, where data becomes important in terms of driving things like student performance, figuring out how we actually drive the effectiveness of graduation, our students actually completing the courseware, maybe even actually workforce placement as it relates to an environment. And then, are you using data to actually drive the right innovation and intervention with students? Are you waiting for kids to drop out of the institution to provide the necessary tools that data can tell you to step in front? Now, as we think about the technology environments, these are elements that I think will be much more important in an impact and results-driven environment that we see in higher education as certainly happening today. And then lastly, research. Certainly, as we think about the economic growth part I talked about earlier, research, and certainly university research, will be a critical element, an asset, a jewel in every country. It's an important element, and we've got to actually do a better job of aligning the teaching and learning environment in campus for every student and the research innovation that's actually funded in higher education. One of the dangerous trends that I see is a growing gap between research and actually the instruction and the teaching and learning environments of institutions. The reality is there were reasons for that in the past, based on the administration of systems in a client-server world. In many cases, the environment was very, very siloed. In the world today with cloud technologies, that can be actually integrated much more broadly. And I think doing a better job of harnessing research to drive the right impact is certainly something that we see as well. Now, we're working hard at Microsoft. I'm just going to highlight a couple of programs. One of them is the Shaksham program that's being focused on public institutions of non-IT, helping faculty members get skills around using technology for computing. This is critically important because everything I've just said is valuable, But what we have to do is get our faculty members to come along to this journey. How do they think about embracing these new ideas, these new concepts? Not only the new tools, but the new ways to structure a class, to think about the learning environment. These are critical elements. And certainly we've seen this in grown programs to support faculty because of the gaps that we see in higher education. But I will tell you, and this is certainly something that I see, it's certainly true with primary education, K through 12, faculty and teachers are critical, but leaders are the most important here. We can get faculty trained all day long, but if our university leadership hasn't established a foundation and expectation for innovation, haven't given the courage and willingness to fail with new approaches and new ideas, haven't created an environment where change is expected and embraced, and sharing becomes a norm. Because in many cases, we've got faculty, points of lights on every one of the campuses in India. And I guarantee you, if I were going on school visits today across universities, I'd see amazing examples of faculty who are using technology to drive transformation in and out of the classroom. And I can also assure you there's faculty members in that same department that aren't doing that. And we've got to find a way to actually bring that together, and we have to start with leaders to drive this change going forward. So I'm excited about the work inside the dialogue and discussion, and I know we have some time for questions, so I hope you have questions. I can talk about any of the things I've talked about before or other issues based on the global trends across higher education that I see. Thank you. So I'm not sure how this is going to work, but there's probably going to be some courageous person who will raise their hand.
Hello.
Hi.
Can you elaborate on the Saksham and Shiksha program of the Microsoft?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
You have mentioned about the two programs of the Saksham and Shiksha program.
Yes,
So
the
what is
Shiksha
that?
program. Yeah, this is very similar to what we've done with Project Shiksha and for K through 12 teachers to get them ready to go for how to use technology in the classrooms. One of the things that we started, Microsoft started a program about 12 years ago called Partners in Learning. Many of you may know about it in India. And it started with this idea that we were going to try to help train teachers. And we've been doing that at Microsoft for many, many years. Across India, we've trained about 1.5 million teachers through Project Shiksha. And initially, we actually didn't think faculty needed the same sort of level of training. So we were training K through 12 teachers on how to use technology in the classrooms. And increasingly, we were getting feedback as we started to work with colleges of education that their faculty across universities they needed that training just to actually use technology to drive their classroom. So we've been doing that work. And that's essentially what the program's all about. We do workshops. We actually have training materials online for faculty to actually get comfortable using technology to drive different teaching, learning environments and a new pedagogy that they'll build within their institutions. And we get great feedback from these programs actually as well, because the faculty that go through the work, they give us lots of innovation on how we can improve our products to make them more useful in higher education as well. Yes?
More and more use of advanced technology for teaching as an aid is likely to reduce the role of a human being as an interface between knowledge and the student. Do we think that it is desirable?
I first will challenge the first point. There's a lot of fear about, hey, technology is going to make teachers obsolete. And kids are looking at screens to completely, etc. When I actually present, and maybe when I present to the teachers later, or maybe even tomorrow in Bombay, I'm going to put up a slide that says, your students are learning without you. And I present this slide all around the world and to rooms of teachers often. And when people see that slide, they're tremendously anxious. Ooh, they feel bad about it. It's a negative reality. And part of this is we've got to free ourselves to think differently. The fact that students can learn outside of the context of a teacher enables the teacher to actually have a bigger, deeper role than ever before. It's a much more human role. The world of work, for example, from a factory environment is now an environment where collaboration and leadership and creative thinking becomes a norm. That requires more advanced teaching. The old world of teaching, which was largely content-focused, was actually much more hard for schools to deliver because you have to have subject matter experts deeply across every subject. The world of internet with technology and digital curriculum and open education resources, I can actually use that to actually come to the aid of faculty and teachers, but they can actually use their time and energy to have more direct and personal connection with students, with new teaching methodologies that actually get them involved to actually drive a student's performance much more deeply. So I actually think the new world of learning is far more personal, even though technology is a part of it. I'm going to learn through others, I'm going to learn online with courses, etc., and I'm going to use my time in classroom with an educator in a more meaningful way. Then I'll open up chapter 5 to page 15 to start working through the content. And I think when you embrace that dynamic, and it's a both, we're going to have technology to support the learning, but we need quality teaching now more than ever before. We've done research, and there's been lots of research done around the world of learning today and the role of an educator. And the reality is the world of learning, the potential we have, requires new pedagogy to instruction, more use of data to actually personalize and individualize learning, more use of motivation to actually push a student's learning path, get them focused on career goals and aspirations. This requires much more advanced teaching and learning environments than we've had historically. In a world of learning that was largely content and assessment focused, the role of a teacher was critical for sure, but it was largely the heavy lifting of content delivery. That has been replaced for sure, but I think the role of a teacher has actually gotten much more rich and much more expansive. And I actually see the world differently than the point before, but I certainly don't want a world where kids are just working on a computer and not interacting. I think, frankly, that's not the world of work. I've probably hired well over a couple of hundred people in my career. I've never asked them any question about anything specific to knowledge. I've asked them about how they work with others, how they interact with others, etc. The world of work requires this interaction. I think that's the new teaching environments that we're seeing. So I actually think it's much more human.
Sir.
I'm not sure. Okay, yes.
Yeah. In your pursuit of training the teachers and of improving the quality, number one, how do you measure quality, whether it's pedagogy or whether it's the quality of education or whether it's the impact of that knowledge or education which is attempting to be imparted? Number one.
Yep.
And number two, do we have after measurement some benchmarks to compare where does India stand, where does relative to the other countries?
Yeah, so there's obviously everyone's looking for data to drive decisions, performance, rankings across universities and certainly globally. The reality is there's many, many ways in which we can do this. This is partly this data discussion. What are we trying to measure? What are we trying to change? Obviously, effective outcomes for me are we employing students to their full potential in the world of work? Are we growing economies and entrepreneurship? It's not good enough in many cases to graduate students if they can't get a job or if the economy is not growing enough jobs to meet the needs of the society, basically the output of an institution. So it starts there from a high level. Then at a very basic level, do you have faculty members that are creating motivated students? Is the interaction exciting and fun? Are we using technology to actually expand the range of classrooms? Because I could have a great lecture, but in the world of infinite possibilities and content creation and leverage, how does a faculty member use the outside world to bring a broader canvas of learning to a student? So there's lots and lots of ways in which I measure innovation. You know it when you see it. You know it when you see this dynamic. And it often starts with what's the environment that's happening with students? Are students motivated to learn and pursue? Are they actually achieving the results that they set out to achieve? As it relates to global benchmarks, you have things like PISA ranking, etc. And those are important, obviously, as it relates to keeping score from a country-to-country perspective on academics. But in my opinion, the easiest way to look at it, the most important way for students and for people, is, do you have a growing economy? Is the economy filled by job creation and entrepreneurship? And if you have those things, it's often because you have a great education system as the backbone to drive that. So that's the way I look at it.
Do you have a matrix or something to define it, or to what is the weightage
Excuse
of
me,
each?
I'm sorry, but this would be the last question as he will have to leave.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Thank
There are lots of examples of benchmarks and matrix, and we actually do lots of data models for institutions to drive effectiveness. So there's probably, if I had more time, I can actually share with you some of the benchmarks, and we actually use machine learning technology to actually do performance measures where we're actually looking at institution data and actually providing insight to actually drive decisions before things happen. So lots of work to drive this focus, and certainly an area that I think will be increasingly important across India. So thank you very much. I appreciate the time. This is just a brief. I know there's lots of other questions. Feel free to email me. My email address is tonysa@microsoft.com. If you have any other questions, if there's any areas that I can help with or make connections with globally, please let me know. Thanks for having me today, and enjoy the rest of the conference. It's a very important conversation, and I look forward to seeing the results. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Anthony.